At their wedding reception, I saw my photo torn and burned behind a flower pot. They thought I'd cry. Instead, I smiled, because I had already changed the inheritance. The music was soft, classical Vivaldi, I think, the kind of song that floats through a room like it owns the silence. The chandeliers glistened above, catching each drop of light and tossing it gently onto the cream-colored linen tablecloths below. Everyone was smiling, everyone but me. I stood at the edge of the reception hall, near the double doors, wearing the same blue dress I wore to church last Easter. It was clean, pressed, modest, appropriate. But as I looked around, I could feel eyes sliding past me as though I didn't exist, that refused to leave the room. They hadn't reserved me a seat. Not at the head table, not even at a table near the back. My name was not on the seating chart, though I had paid for the florist and half the catering. I was told, kindly but firmly, by a teenage usher with braces and pimples, "Ma'am, there's standing room near the kitchen if you need a place to rest." Ma'am, that was the closest thing to respect I would hear all evening. Philip, my only son, looked radiant in his tailored tuxedo. He smiled, like a man who believed the future belonged solely to him now. And Jody, well, Jody was the picture of bridal perfection, if perfection wore contempt like perfume. She looked stunning, yes, but her beauty always seemed to demand a price. Her wedding gown shimmered as she floated from group to group, hugging guests, tossing glances, whispering into ears. Not once did she look in my direction, not until it was time. She approached with a sly grace, bouquet in one hand and something else folded, yellowed, clutched in the other. I recognized it before she even unfolded it. It was the photograph. Me, holding Philip the day he was born. My hair was damp from the hospital sweat. My smile, too wide, too relieved. I had survived the pain. I had survived being left alone at the delivery room. That photo was the only proof that I had done something right, that he had once belonged to me. Jody unfolded it slowly, theatrically. She held it up high, like an exhibit in a courtroom. Then she turned to me, smiling sweetly in front of the crowd that had begun to hush, sensing spectacle. "This," she said loudly, "is a piece of the past we'd rather not carry into our new life." She lit the edge with a taper candle from the centerpiece. The flames crawled across my memory, as if eager to consume me whole. The photo curled inward, then blackened. Ash rained down onto her perfectly manicured fingers. And then Philip, my son, stepped forward, plucked a white rose from a nearby bouquet, and used it like a broom to sweep the ashes into a flower pot beside the podium. "That's you now," he said, voice low but sharp enough to pierce bone. "A pile of ashes. That's all you are to us." A silence settled over the room, heavier than any organ note. Someone coughed. A child whispered something about the mean lady. Laughter followed. "Do not ruin our day," Philip added. "If you ever loved me at all, you'll leave." I looked at them both, the son I raised and the woman who now controlled every blink of his conscience. I looked at the guests, most of them pretending they hadn't seen, hadn't heard, and I smiled. Not because I was okay, not because I forgave, but because I knew what they didn't. I had already rewritten the ending of this story. If you feel justice deserves celebration, smash that hype button. Let us keep stories like this alive, echoing far, far away. Your support helps us bring understanding and love to those who deserve it. Thank you so much. Keep listening. I turned slowly, not a tear in sight, and walked out of the grand ballroom. No one followed. No one called my name. But as I reached the cold marble hallway, I caught a glimpse of myself in a tall mirror. Wrinkled, yes, weathered surely, but I looked steady, rooted. A woman who had weathered worse than this, and who still had one last movement left to play. The wind was biting as I stepped outside, but I welcomed the cold. It reminded me I was still here, still capable of choices, and some choices were already made. I was 23 when I started teaching music at the local community center. The pay was nothing to brag about, but the pianos were in tune, the students eager, and for a while, that was enough. I met Thomas at a faculty mixer. He taught economics and wore corduroy like he invented it. He said he loved how I saw the world in chords and harmonies. He proposed with a second-hand ring and a smile that made me believe music could last forever. It did not. By the time Philip was 4, Thomas had left me for my closest friend, a woman I used to walk to choir with on Sunday mornings. She was softer spoken, better dressed, and according to his family, more suited for the man he had become. They called me too rigid, too intense, too dramatic. But what they meant was, I did not bend, I did not beg, I did not disappear. Rumors claimed I destroyed his career, that my grief made him leave. Others said grief pushed him into another woman's arms. For years, I could not correct the story. I was too busy surviving it. I sold my wedding piano to pay for Philip's preschool. I worked night shifts at a laundromat downtown, breathing in bleach and silence. I taught part-time music lessons in my living room to make up the gap. I would watch Philip sleep on the couch while I helped neighborhood kids learn scales and arpeggios. I kept a jar of coins labeled college. I never spent a dime of it. He was a good boy, Philip. Smart, serious, always asking questions about how things worked. When he got his scholarship to business school, I nearly fainted from relief. I remember pressing that acceptance letter to my chest like it could patch every wound I had collected since Thomas walked out. Years later, when Philip married Jody, I thought my sacrifices had finally bloomed into something beautiful. I moved to a small house 10 minutes from theirs, hoping to be the kind of grandmother that bakes cookies and teaches lullabies. For a while, I was, until Jody decided I was not convenient anymore. She was beautiful, that much I admit, the kind of woman who always looked polished, even in yoga pants. But behind closed doors, her beauty curdled into cruelty. Subtle at first. A raised eyebrow when I brought hand-me-down toys. A thank you that sounded more like, finally. Then came the comments. "You should not pick him up from school," she said one day. "He says your car smells like old people." When I offered to babysit longer on weekends so they could have time together, she replied, "We appreciate it, but please don't confuse babysitting with parenting. Boundaries matter." And then the worst of it, "Please stop hugging them so much. They are getting confused. You are not their mother." That one cut deeper than anything Thomas ever said. Philip stood by her every time. He told me she was just protecting her space, that I should adapt to new dynamics. But I saw it for what it was, erasure dressed in etiquette. Still, I stayed. I loved my grandchildren. I kept showing up until the day I found the folder. It was in their home office. I had come by to drop off a casserole and noticed the drawer ajar. I do not snoop, but something, call it gut, call it grief, urged me to look. Inside was a printout from Jody's former employer, a formal termination letter. Words like embezzlement, unauthorized fund access, breach of ethical conduct leapt off the page like fire. I put it back exactly where I found it. I did not confront her. Not then. A week later, over dinner, I brought it up delicately. "Jody," I said, "I once had a student who made a big mistake at work, but people change. Some just need someone to believe in them again." Her eyes narrowed. "What are you implying?" Philip interrupted. "Mom, if you have something to say, say it." "I just hope you know everything before you put your future in someone's hands," I said. "You've worked too hard to have it all taken away." That is when he exploded. "You are jealous," he spat. "You cannot stand seeing me love someone who is not you. You never even had a real wedding. You wore a discount dress in a courthouse. Jody is everything you never were." That night, they asked me to take space. They framed it as kindness, said it would be better for everyone if you focused on yourself. So I did. I focused on myself, and on something else too. I saw clearly then that they did not hate me for what I had done. They hated me for what I refused to be. I would not lie. I would not smile when I was insulted. I would not hand over my silence in exchange for proximity to my grandchildren. They called it bitterness. They called it stubbornness. But what they really meant was, I remembered. I remembered what was right, and I dared to say it out loud. And for that, they decided I no longer deserved to be part of their picture. So they burned mine. But they forgot that I had built the frame. The night after the wedding, I returned to my apartment, the one no one knew about, A third-floor walk-up with creaky stairs and water stains on the ceiling, but it was mine. I paid the rent on time. I bought the furniture second-hand, and most importantly, I kept it off the books. No address change, no forwarding mail, just a quiet place for a woman they all thought was fading. I kicked off my shoes, sat on the small velvet bench in front of the upright piano that leaned ever so slightly to the left, and opened the seat. The contract was right where I had left it. 15 years ago, Philip had been different, hungry, ambitious, still tethered to the ground. He came to me in that same living room with a printed proposal and fire in his eyes. "Mom, I have a shot. I just need startup money. If I can get a loan, I can build something that lasts." I had already saved up $150,000 over the years. Not for him, exactly, just in case life decided to be cruel again. But when he asked, I gave it, not out of blind trust, no. I was older by then, seasoned by betrayal. I told him, very calmly, "I will do this, but I want it in writing. I want to be listed as a founding partner, not because I want control, but because I want to matter, officially." He hesitated at first, said paperwork might complicate future investments. I insisted. So we sat at my kitchen table, and he signed a notarized contract stating I was a 50% silent partner in the new company. He promised dividends, equity, and that my name would be respected in all formal documentation. 2 months later, he met Jody. Within the year, everything changed. Meetings were suddenly too technical for me. Company milestones were celebrated without my knowledge. I asked about the paperwork once, and Jody, with a smile too sweet to be sincere, said, "Oh, that silly contract? Philip thought you would forget all about it." He called less, visited less. Eventually, when I brought up the business again, he said, "Mom, you really do not need to worry about those things. It is just too much for you now." Too much for me. They assumed age was a fog. They assumed silence was surrender. They did not know that every time they spoke down to me, I remembered more. Every slight was a stitch. And one day, the whole quilt would speak. That night, I unfolded the contract with my arthritic hands, careful not to tear the aging paper. The signature was still legible, pressed right beneath his unchanged. But just in case something happened to me, and I always believed something might, I had made a copy. Years ago, I slipped it into the back panel of a wooden music box my grandmother had left me. I gifted that box to someone who understood the value of keeping what others discard. I gifted that box to Catherine years ago when she was still a teenager, telling her, "If ever my voice fades, keep this safe." Then I trusted she would know what to do. Catherine. She had been just 13 when I met her. Poor, quiet, but fierce. She practiced piano in a church basement because her family could not afford lessons. I saw her one day, copying notes onto scrap paper, and offered to teach her for free. She accepted like it was a trap. I liked that about her. Years later, when she was evicted from her apartment by a landlord who just happened to be Jody, I took her in for a few months. She repaid me with loyalty, not pity. I told her, "If anything ever happens to me, that box matters." She nodded, no questions asked. Now, with the original in one hand and the memory of the backup in the other, I felt a calm certainty I had not known in years. Philip might have built a business, but I had built the foundation. And if he wanted to pretend I did not exist, he was going to learn what it meant to have erased the wrong woman. I placed the contract in a new envelope, sealed it, and called a lawyer the next morning. Not the flashy kind Philip liked to keep on retainer, but an old friend, one of my former students, now a partner at a firm that handled estate cases. "I want to activate my rights," I said plainly. "You have every legal ground to do so," he replied after reviewing the contract. "This is airtight, but you realize this will cause an eruption." I smiled. Good. Maybe then they will hear me for the first time in 15 years. There is a particular pleasure in watching someone underestimate you for so long that they forget you ever stood tall. But the ground does not forget. The roots remember, and I had planted mine deep. Philip and Jody thought I was just a guest at their wedding. They forgot I was once the architect of their future. and the bill was long overdue. 3 months before the wedding, I ran into Catherine by chance, or perhaps by providence. It was in the waiting room of a free clinic downtown. I was there for my blood pressure check. She was sitting with a tattered backpack in her lap, legs crossed at the ankles, eyes scanning a medical pamphlet like it held the answers to questions no one had ever asked her kindly. I recognized her instantly, though it had been years. "Catherine?" I asked, gently. She looked up slowly, uncertain, until her eyes widened with recognition. She stood, uncertain whether to hug me or apologize for existing. "I didn't think you'd remember me," she said. How could I forget the only child who ever practiced piano until her fingertips blistered? I smiled, and it was real. We talked over coffee afterward. She was older now, 28, but the same sharpness was in her voice, the same guarded decency. I learned that after college, she had bounced between nonprofit jobs and house-sitting gigs. She never quite fit in the rooms where power sat, but she always found her way to the people who needed help the most. And then came Jody. She owned the building I rented in the city, Catherine told me, stirring her coffee. Raised the rent 40% overnight. When I couldn't pay, she showed up with a man in a suit and an attitude like I was filth on her designer shoes. I nodded slowly. I already knew what Jody was capable of. But hearing it from Catherine lit a different fire inside me. There was something about injustice finding its way to the wrong people that made silence feel like complicity. That evening, I pulled out my legal folder. I had kept it updated, every asset, every account, every policy documented and ready for change. For years, Philip's name had been on every line. The house I paid off, the company shares I once funded, the life insurance I kept even when I had no one to depend on it. But that night, I opened a fresh form, and I wrote, Catherine Miller. I transferred the deed to the home I used to live in, valued at over $500,000 now, to her name. I reassigned my 50% share in Philip's company, using the original contract as the legal foundation. My lawyer confirmed it. I had the right to name my successor. I chose Catherine. I updated my life insurance policy, listing her as the sole beneficiary. And then, I did something I had been dreaming about for years. I created a foundation. It was called the Forgotten Mother Fund. Its mission, to provide safe housing, musical education, and legal aid to elderly women abandoned by their families. I would fund it with the remainder of my savings and future company dividends. Catherine would be the director, both in name and heart. When I handed her the folder a week later, she stared at it for a long time before opening it. Her hands trembled. "I can't take this," she whispered. "You already did," I replied. "The moment you listened, the moment you stayed kind in a world that tried to make you small." She shook her head. "What if something happens to you?" I smiled, that same tired smile I had worn the night they burned my photo. "If one day I disappear, you'll know exactly what to do." She cried then, silently, her shoulders shaking like a child who had not been held in too long. I placed a hand on hers. "They think legacy is blood, but it is not. It is character. It is who shows up when everyone else leaves." And just like that, I rewrote the ending to a story they thought they owned. Philip may have been my son, but Catherine would be my legacy. Philip threw the kind of party that begged for attention. 1 month into their marriage, and they were already calling it a celebration of lasting love. There were lights, a champagne tower, a string quartet hired just for ambiance, and a videographer weaving through the crowd like it was the Oscars. Guests arrived in designer suits and sequin gowns. Every detail screamed, "Look at us, we made it." But someone else was about to take the spotlight. That same evening, precisely 30 minutes into their live-stream toast, just as Philip raised his glass to thank the universe for a life perfectly aligned, another live stream went live. Catherine. She sat in a modest room, backlit by warm light, a simple piano behind her. The caption read, "For Natalie, her voice will be heard." No hashtags, no logos, just truth. By the time she spoke her first word, over 53,000 viewers had tuned in. "I am Catherine Miller," she began. "I am the legal heir of Natalie Harper, and tonight I am reading her final wishes, not in secret, not behind closed doors, but in front of everyone who ever doubted she mattered. The comments section exploded. People were confused, curious, suspicious. But then she played the clip. It started silent, a blur of champagne and satin. Then Jody's voice, clear as crystal. "This is a piece of the past we'd rather not carry into our new life." The screen showed her lighting the photograph. The flames licked the image until it crumbled. Then Philip, pushing the ashes into a flower pot with a white rose, muttering, "That's you now." A pile of ashes. Gasps echoed in chat. The video cut back to Catherine, face solemn. "You may not know who Natalie Harper was, but after this, you will never forget." She unfolded a letter and began to read. "To whom it may concern, I, Natalie Harper, in sound mind and steadied heart, do hereby revoke all previous testaments. I leave nothing to Philip Harper, my biological son, nor to Jody Harper, his wife. Their actions have shown a willful and repeated dismissal of not only my presence, but my humanity. I instead bequeath my entire estate, comprising 2 properties, 50% ownership of Harper and Wells Consulting, and my life insurance policy to Catherine Miller. She is not my blood, but she is my daughter in every way that counts. To the one who listened, I leave everything. To the ones who burned my memory, I burn their entitlement." It was the final blow they never saw coming. Within minutes, the hashtags trended. Number Justice for Natalie. Number Elder Abuse Exposed. Number Bridezilla from Hell. Clips of Jody torching the photo flooded TikTok and Instagram. Reaction videos poured in, therapists explaining signs of emotional neglect, lawyers dissecting the power of elder protection laws, grandmothers crying quietly into their iPads. Commenters rallied. She raised him alone, and they threw her away. Protect your mothers. This is America's shame. Jody belongs in the Hall of Shame. Philip too. The press latched on. Wife who burned MIL's photo loses inheritance in viral will. Morning talk shows ran segments. An investigative podcast picked it up within a week. But what really crushed them was not the mockery. It was the visibility. Philip tried to hold another press conference days later, tears in his eyes, saying he was blindsided and loved his mother dearly. But people remembered the rose in the flower pot. They remembered the silence in the ballroom when no one defended her. And now, they listened to someone else. Catherine signed off with one last message. This story isn't just about Natalie. It's about every mother, grandmother, and forgotten woman who gave everything and was repaid with silence. Not anymore. Then she reached behind her, opened the piano, and played the lullaby Natalie once taught her, soft, haunting, familiar. Across the world, the echo of those notes rang louder than any wedding toast ever could. The first letter arrived 3 days after the livestream. Philip opened it with the same careless confidence he used when tossing aside a restaurant bill. But this envelope was different. It bore the seal of the county clerk's office and the heading in bold, Notice of Pending Litigation and Asset Hold. His company, Harper & Wells Consulting, had its assets frozen, effective immediately. All bank accounts were suspended, all transactions locked, payroll halted, clients informed. The letter cited an ongoing dispute regarding shareholder legitimacy and concealed partner equity. He read it twice before the color drained from his face. At the bottom of the page, it read, Claimant, Catherine Miller, representative of Miss Natalie Harper, founding equity partner, documented. He rushed to his office, pulled out the old binder he never opened, and found nothing. No copy of the contract, no trace of my name. Because Jody had told him to clean things up years ago, said, It's cleaner without her on the books. But I had never left the books. I just had my own copy, sealed, notarized, and now in the hands of a legal team determined to make them squirm. By the end of the week, the firm's largest client had backed out of a $1 million contract, citing reputational damage. Their second largest went quiet, emails bounced, calls went unanswered. Within 10 days, Philip's entire empire, built on forgotten promises and gaslighting, was sinking. Several major contracts were canceled due to legal uncertainty. Suppliers halted shipments. Key investors withdrew funding indefinitely. The business bled from every direction. Jody screamed. She blamed the lawyers, the internet, cancel culture, and finally, Philip himself. You were supposed to handle her. You said she was senile. But senile women do not keep receipts. And I had all of them. A second letter arrived the following Monday. This one addressed to the occupants of 117 Rosewood Lane, Jody's dream home. The 5-bedroom colonial with marble countertops and a walk-in closet the size of my old apartment. The home she decorated with Pinterest boards and magazine swatches. The one I had bought years ago and titled to myself, quietly, while she thought I was just staying over for a few months. The notice read, effective immediately, the property located at 117 Rosewood Lane is to be vacated within 30 calendar days. This property now belongs to the Forgotten Mother Fund, a nonprofit organization registered under the state of New York, represented by Catherine Miller. Any refusal to comply will result in civil litigation for property trespassing and damages. It hit her harder than the company collapse. Her screams, according to a neighbor, were heard from the next block. "You can't kick me out of my house," she reportedly cried. But it was not hers. It had never been hers. She had poured wine on my tablecloths. She had whispered about my cooking behind my back. She had called me useless while walking across floors I paid for. And now, the house would be a sanctuary for women like me, forgotten, discarded, but not defeated. Within days, contractors arrived, hired by the foundation to assess the house for renovation into a transitional housing and music education center. They walked through with clipboards, ignoring Jody's protests, measuring walls and taking notes. One woman, a social worker with kind eyes, said softly to Jody as she passed, "This house is going to save lives. Thank you for keeping it warm until now." Jody almost collapsed. Catherine made a public statement later that week, posted to the foundation's newly launched website. As legal representative of Miss Natalie Harper, and as someone who was once saved by her kindness, I am proud to announce that Harper & Wells Consulting will cease operation in its current form. Over the next year, we will transition it into a nonprofit institution, the Harper Academy for Music and Resilience, a place where homeless and underserved youth can learn, create, and rebuild. She smiled, not smugly, but sincerely. Natalie believed music could save us. Now it will. The post went viral. Again. Commenters celebrated the poetic justice. A company that ignored the music will now teach it? Oh, the irony. That house will be filled with laughter now instead of cruelty. This is how you honor the women who came before. Philip tried to contest the will, filed a suit to claim undue influence, claimed Catherine manipulated me in my old age. But the court reviewed the medical documents. My cognitive assessments were clear. I had passed my mental evaluations with precision. My lawyer had documented everything: dates, audio, video, even my personal letters. The judge dismissed the case in less than 10 minutes. In the end, Philip did not just lose a company, he lost his illusion of control. Jody lost her pedestal. And I gained something far more valuable than revenge. I reclaimed my voice. And I gave it to others. It started with a shaky phone camera and a late-night Instagram notification. Philip, unshaven and clearly unraveling, appeared live at 1:12 a.m. His eyes were puffy, the apartment behind him half-packed, boxes strewn across the floor. He wore a sweatshirt that still had the store tag on it, a desperate attempt to look casual, maybe, or just a sign of how quickly his world had collapsed. Over 6,000 people joined within the first 5 minutes. "I never thought I'd be doing something like this," he began, voice thick with self-pity. "But I guess I deserve it." He sniffled, paused, looked into the camera as if trying to make eye contact with the mother he had erased. "Mom," he said, his voice breaking, "if you can see this wherever you are, I'm sorry." He inhaled sharply, like he wanted to summon sincerity from a place that had long dried up. "I messed up. I let people get in my head. I let pride, I guess, get the best of me. You were always there. You gave me everything, and I didn't protect you. I didn't appreciate you. I should have. I should have stopped Jody. I should have. He covered his face with his hands, sobbing. Please, please give me a second chance. I don't care about the company, or the money, or the house. I just want you back. I just want to talk to you again. Thousands watched, commenting with mixed reactions. Some offered sympathy, others weren't as forgiving. But the true response came the next morning. Catherine, poised as ever, released a statement on the Foundation's official page. It was brief, elegant, and impossible to misinterpret. Statement from the estate of Natalie Harper. We are aware of the public apology issued by Philip Harper. While we acknowledge the pain behind his words, we must honor Natalie's final written statement regarding any such requests. It reads, "If my son apologizes after losing money, then he has not yet understood the value of love. He is not seeking me. He is seeking restoration of control. And I did not live this long just to hand it back to someone who only remembers me when the world no longer bows at his feet. Therefore, we respectfully decline to engage further." The message was shared over 80,000 times in 24 hours. Talk shows dissected every word. Psychologists broke down the difference between guilt and grief. Survivors of elder neglect flooded comment sections with stories of their own. The internet had long memory now, and it remembered what Philip and Jody had done. As for Jody, her fall was even sharper. She had once built a career on charm and sharp wit, hosting a late-morning lifestyle segment on a major media network, offering beauty tips, marriage advice, and inspirational quotes stolen from Pinterest and passed off as gospel. But after the video of her burning, the photograph went viral, combined with her dismissal of elderly drama during an earlier Now We're Surfaced podcast. Her employers had no choice. They terminated her contract with immediate effect, citing gross violation of ethical conduct and damage to public trust. In a particularly biting twist, her segment slot was later filled by a program focused on intergenerational healing through music, partially funded by the Forgotten Mother Fund. Catherine even made a guest appearance on its second episode. "I used to think I needed to be born into a good family to be worthy of one," she said calmly. "But then I met a woman who lost everything, and still gave. And she taught me that found families can be even more sacred because they are chosen." Meanwhile, Philip was forced to sell his car. He moved into a friend's spare room. His bank accounts remained frozen pending the outcome of remaining audits. Job offers dried up. His name, once proudly printed on corporate brochures, had become an internet cautionary tale. Everywhere he went, people whispered. Not about the business, not about the money, but about the mother he betrayed on camera. And there was no rebranding out of that. He tried to write a blog post once, titled, "What I've Learned from Losing Everything." It was met with thousands of comments, most of them quoting the line from Natalie's will. "To the ones who burned my memory, I burn their entitlement." It had become a rallying cry, printed onto shirts, etched on protest signs, tattooed, even, by a few especially devoted fans of the story. Natalie Harper, once invisible even in her own family, had become a symbol, a quiet revolution. Proof that dignity has no expiration date, and love, real love, requires presence, not apology. And Philip? He learned, finally, that some bridges, when burned, do not smolder. They ignite the whole sky. It was snowing that Christmas, the gentle kind that falls like forgiveness, soft and steady, dusting the sidewalks in quiet white. Inside Natalie House, the old colonial that once echoed with Jody's sharp heels and hollow laughter, warmth radiated from every brick. The living room had been transformed into a music hall. The grand piano sat at the center like a proud elder among children, polished to a shine, its keys worn slightly by small, hopeful fingers. The tree stood tall in the corner, decorated with handmade ornaments, paper treble, clefs, painted notes, and drawings from the children who now called this place their home. I sat by the fireplace, in a high-backed armchair draped with a quilt Catherine had sewn herself. I watched them, these children of misfortune, these daughters and sons of circumstance, laughing, sharing, playing, practicing with unpolished skill and unstoppable joy. Catherine stood before them like a lighthouse. She wore no microphone, but every child leaned in when she spoke. Her voice carried a calm that once cracked with doubt. Now it rang clear. She walked to the piano bench, lifted a small wrapped box from the seat, and opened it with careful hands. Inside, folded with reverence, was an old sheet of music faded at the edges, notes handwritten in ink that had seen too many winters. She unfolded it slowly, as if not to disturb the silence that had long held it. "For the one who listened," she read aloud. "I wrote it in 1985, during one of those long nights when Philip was still young and I was still hopeful before betrayal, before erasure, before ashes in flower pots. I never performed it, never shared it, but I kept it. For someone, for someday." Catherine placed the music on the stand and nodded to a boy, no older than 10, sitting nervously beside her. He lifted his hands, touched the keys like they were a secret only he could hear, and began to play. The room hushed. The melody was simple but aching. Each note felt like memory stretched into sound. I closed my eyes and let it wash over me, not as a requiem, but a release. When it ended, the children clapped, not wildly, but with the kind of applause that says, "I understand." Catherine turned back to them, holding a letter now. She unfolded it, my handwriting, still strong, still sure. "I want to share something with you," she said. "It was written by the woman whose name this house bears, and whose heart still lives in every corner of it." She began to read. "To the ones who were told they were too loud, too quiet, too broken, too poor. To the ones who were ignored when they spoke, or punished when they dared to dream. If someone ever made you feel like your presence was a burden, remember, you always have a place in the heart of a mother out there, maybe not the one who gave birth to you, but the one who saw you, heard you, and never forgot your worth. Music saved my sanity. Kindness saved my soul. If this house does anything, let it be both for someone else. Keep listening. Natalie." Her voice wavered on the last line. The children were quiet, some holding hands, some wiping cheeks. I sat still, not because I was hiding tears, but because I had already cried them. And what came now was peace. A peace earned, not given. Outside those doors, the world spun on. Philip lived in a small rental above a mechanic's shop, shared walls, no fireplace. He worked part-time processing invoices for a logistics firm no one had heard of. Jody, now unrecognizable from her broadcast days, washed dishes at a chain diner off the interstate. Her hair always tied back, her name tag often misspelled. She rarely spoke to customers. Not because she was ashamed, no, she had long passed shame, but because no one there cared who she had once been. And maybe that was the justice in it all. I did not strike the blow. They did, with their own hands. I only removed the cushion of comfort that had protected their cruelty. Once it was gone, the fall was theirs to take. Meanwhile, Natalie House grew. Donations poured in after the story went viral. A second house was purchased in Baltimore, a third in Detroit. Catherine now oversaw a board of directors, including social workers, artists, teachers, and one retired judge who had once presided over a housing case she lost. Every Christmas, they gathered at the original house for a concert. They called it the Listening Eve. And every year, they ended with the same lullaby. The one I wrote for the one who listened. So now, when people ask if I got revenge, I say no. I got something better. I got legacy. Thank you for listening to my story. If it reached you, if it stirred something quiet and deep inside you, then maybe you too have carried a silence that deserves to be heard. This is not just my story. It's the story of every woman who gave everything and was repaid with nothing but silence. Until now. If you believe stories like these matter, if you believe that wisdom, memory, and quiet strength still have a place in this loud world, then I invite you to stay with us. Subscribe to Grandma True Stories, where the forgotten are finally remembered, and every whisper carries the weight of truth. Because revenge has no expiration date. And when a grandma speaks, the world listens.